Welcome to Freethought Matters. I'm Laurie Gaylor.
And I'm Dan Barker. We're executive directors of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces this show. Today, we're going to talk with Alex Aronson, executive director of Court Accountability, about court corruption and what needs to be done about it.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces Freethought Matters, is the nation's largest association of free thinkers. That's atheists, agnostics, and other non-believers. We invite you to join us in our vital work to keep our secular government free from religious influence. Become a member at FFRF.org or ask for a complimentary copy of our newspaper, Freethought Today. Freedom depends on freethinkers. Watch prior episodes of Freethought Matters on FFRF's YouTube channel.
Is the Supreme Court corrupted? We'll talk about that, as well as the dangers of Project 2025, with Alex Aronson, co-founder and executive director of Court Accountability. Alex has been a political organizer, civil rights lawyer, and commentator.
Alex Aronson has served as chief counsel and senior counsel to U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, as managing director of the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection at the Georgetown University Law Center, and was an attorney at the U.S. Department of Justice.
Welcome to Freethought Matters, Alex.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you guys again.
Alex, why did you co-found Court Accountability, and what does the group advocate?
So we founded Court Accountability in 2023 following my tenure in the Senate as chief counsel for Senator Whitehouse. I worked for him in a number of roles on the Senate Judiciary Committee starting in 2017 at the beginning of the Trump administration. And I left that period of years feeling like there was a lot to be done to better understand and confront what had happened in our federal courts, particularly during that time, but not exclusively at all, right? Those years really represented to me the coming to fruition of a 50-year-long campaign to capture and weaponize the federal courts to advance a oligarchic and theocratic agenda. And during the Trump years, Trump, of course, did not know very much about the judges, did not know very much about the courts, and he effectively outsourced judicial selection to Leonard Leo, the vice president at the time of the Federalist Society, and this network of special interest groups who had spent years trying to not only shape the composition of the courts, but to use the judges and the law to change our world, to change our society, to rewrite the Constitution, to advance these interests that they were so committed to. And during that time I spent in the Senate, those 5 years, what I saw was sort of a failure to respond to the nature and urgency of what I felt was a threat to American democracy. I think for too long, progressives, liberals, the media, Democrats, the legal profession itself had failed to recognize what this project was about. We took it on its own terms. We thought about originalism as a good faith intellectual rival rather than as a pretext for a political project. And we allowed these judges and this special interest movement to seize all this power, seize constitutional power at the people's expense. We founded Court Accountability to start to change the paradigm a bit in terms of how folks were thinking about this. We do research and investigations to expose these corrupting influences, the special interest influences across a range of issues. And we do a lot of political advocacy and policy advocacy around oversight of the courts and the dark money network behind it, and legislation, right, to come up with a theory of the case, a reform agenda to rebalance power and let the people have more of a voice in our democracy.
You're sounding the alarm, looks like, about the federal courts at all levels. But what are your concerns about the U.S. Supreme Court and its lack of accountability for, well, their ethical breaches?
Accountability is such an important part of this. The justices at the Supreme Court, uniquely among federal judges, sort of uniquely among senior government officials across the board, are not held to any standards. There are federal laws that apply to them, but there's no way to enforce them. And we've seen that play out over the last year and a half since the big breaking scandal that ProPublica reported on in April of 2023, when they found evidence that over decades, Clarence Thomas had been receiving free gifts and travel, upwards of $4 million in free gifts, many of which came from billionaires that had direct financial interest before the court. There are recusal laws, there are ethics laws that apply to these justices which cannot be enforced against them. The lower court judges have an enforceable ethics code. If they break these laws, if they break the ethics codes that apply to them under the federal judicial standards, they can be disciplined. And the Supreme Court justices tell us that they can't be disciplined, that they are on an island. And so when we have made efforts to get Congress to do real work, to oversee them, to hold them to account, to get to the bottom of the extent of this corruption, the justices have sort of told them to pound sand. They said, we won't respond to your oversight, we won't come testify. And that's really not how it should be. I think Americans of all ideological stripes see that things are deeply out of kilter. It cannot be that the justices on the highest court of the land should be able to do what they want without any accountability. And I think they've proven themselves untrustworthy in that regard.
So you've talked about right-wing money. What role has the Federalist Society played in all of this?
The Federalist Society is a critically important hub of the right-wing legal movement. Of course, I think many people know the Federalist Society as what it presents itself to be, which is a debating society for conservative lawyers. They're very active on law schools. I remember when I was a law student, the Federalist Society had a lot of members. They had great lunches. They had great speakers come from all across the country, fancy judges. It's a really useful place for law students to kind of be and engage with, because you can tap into this extensive pipeline, this career development network that they have built there. What I think too many people fail to recognize about the Federalist Society is that it is not just this convening space, but it is effectively a front or a veneer for a much deeper and broader special interest network of lawyers, academics, opposition researchers, communicators, politicians, and judges, of course, that all combine to create this right-wing legal ecosystem, and that's funded by billions of dollars in special interest money.
And right-wing, but also like Christian nationalist influence with all that. Alito, what do you think should have happened when it was revealed last year that a Stop the Steal symbol and a flag associated with Christian nationalism had been flown at Justice Alito's homes last year?
It was a staggering revelation by the New York Times. Jody Cantor reported that story. It was reported just this past year, but of course, the flag was flying outside Alito's home in January of 2021. While the cases were coming up to the Supreme Court, while the court was considering these cases about Trump's efforts to steal the election, and the court knew about this because the Washington Post had failed to report on the story, but knew about the story and sought comment from the court. So all the justices knew about this. John Roberts knew about it. He was flying this flag. It was an upside-down American flag, which at the time had very clear associations with the Stop the Steal insurrection. And of course, later that year, the New York Times later reported that Alito was flying a Christian nationalist flag that also had associations with the January 6th insurrection. These flags and the appearance they give of his allegiance to Trump, to his allegiance to MAGA, and to this Stop the Steal movement create a clear appearance of conflict. And the federal recusal statute requires that any justice whose impartiality might reasonably be questioned shall disqualify himself from a case that presents that conflict. A number of members of Congress, my former boss, Senator Whitehouse, the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, Dick Durbin, Jamie Raskin in the House, other members of Congress sought Justice Alito's recusal. Alito refused to recuse. He said that no reasonable person could believe he was not impartial as to this question. He added all sorts of additional sort of atextual requirements to the statute. He said no reasonable person who doesn't have a political bias could question his impartiality. Of course, many people without political bias did, and that's not actually the statutory standard. So here's a great example of the ways in which these justices hold themselves to their own rule. And there's real parallels here to what they did in the Trump immunity case, right? Where they basically said that Trump is absolutely immune for any official acts. He can't be prosecuted. They certainly seem to feel the same way about their own behavior, their own conduct. They can break the law without any recourse for the people.
So what dangers do you see with this corrupted court and the upcoming Trump administration, where there's no brakes for the court, there's no brakes for Trump?
You know, this goes back deep into our country's founding and into our history. This was exactly the type of tyranny that the framers were concerned about when they set up our very delicately balanced three-branch system. This level of lack of accountability, this degree of unilateral power over the laws of our country were not what the framers had in mind. This is not what Marbury versus Madison was intended to mean in terms of absolute judicial supremacy, which is what it's become. We can go back to the Civil War era when the court decided Dred Scott, and of course in Lincoln's first inaugural address, he described how if the laws of our country on the matters of great policy, important national policy, were going to be decided by a court, be irrevocably fixed by a Supreme Court, then the people would cease to be their own rulers. And that is the danger that we face right now, particularly as this court works in lockstep with the MAGA agenda across other critical levers of government.
So what can we do about it? What does your group suggest we should do about it?
We're in a tough spot right now, right? They have gotten much farther in this anti-democratic entrenchment of minority interests than we should have ever let them get. They now control not only a durably entrenched majority of the U.S. Supreme Court, that 6-3 majority that they control is unlikely to be rebalanced through the electoral process anytime soon. Some scholars have calculated it as likely to last for decades. But they've also got the executive branch. They've got a majority of state legislatures and both branches of Congress. So in the near term, it is unlikely that we'll be able to advance any meaningful reforms legislatively to check this abuse of power. And so I think we need to look at what they've done in a way in terms of developing a long-term strategy. I don't think we have quite as long as they had because I think their project was ultimately destructive, whereas ours is a constructive project to re-empower American democracy. And they're aggressively winnowing that away, right? Year after year, we get rulings on dark money, which allows billionaires like Elon Musk to flood our elections. Rulings on gerrymandering and voter suppression, which make it harder and harder for the will of the people to prevail in elections. But in the immediate term, what I think we really need to do is start to confront these courts much more directly. Democrats, the mainstream media, anybody that's civically engaged needs to understand that the court is not a neutral arbiter of law. It is not acting impartially like an umpire, as Justice Roberts was famous for saying in his confirmation hearing, but it is a weaponized branch, the most dangerous branch of this MAGA project. And so we need to center it in our conversations about what's happening in our country. We need to be brave and willing to confront its abuse of power. We can't just accede to its theft of our constitutional democracy. When, for example, the court decides a case like Trump versus United States and says that a president is absolutely immune, which is a position that is anathema to the founding principles and deeply unpopular with the American people. We need to confront it. And actually, I think the response to that case provides both lessons and opportunities for us. I think far too many sort of criticized the case but said, oh, there's nothing we can do about it. Refreshingly, Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Senate Democratic caucus, the Senate Majority Leader, he introduced a bill called the No Kings Act. It not only declared that Congress rejected the outcome of the Trump immunity decision, but it stripped the Supreme Court of jurisdiction to review these questions going forward. And that is a power that is well within Congress's orbit, right? The entire appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court is subject to the exceptions and regulations that Congress shall make. And the Congress can do a lot to constrain this court. I think politically, we need to understand that Republicans for decades now have outsourced their most unpopular policymaking priorities to the unelected, unaccountable judges on the federal judiciary. We need to better connect the dots between the Republicans that put these judges on the bench and the outcomes that the judges are handing down.
We're talking with Alex Aronson. He's with Court Accountability. And when we come back, Alex, let's pivot to the threats of Project 2025 and Christian nationalism.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist.
When I first recorded that commercial back in 2014, being openly atheist in America was still fairly uncommon. Today, the fastest growing religious group in the country is the non-religious, especially among the young. That progress is heartening, but the religious pushback is fierce and the forces of Christian nationalism are well organized. Our progress won't continue unless we work together so that reason and our secular constitution will prevail. That's why I'm asking you to join the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics working to keep state and church separate, just like our founders intended. Please join the Freedom from Religion Foundation today. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
My name's Jarvis, and I'm an out-of-the-closet atheist. There are many reasons why I'm an atheist, but I'll start with the crudest explanation. I'm sure many of you have seen Clash of the Titans or The Immortals or 300, these blockbuster films about ancient Greek or Roman religion, which we now call mythology. But back then it wasn't mythology. It was very real for them. They genuinely believed that you had to put a coin in a person's mouth before they were buried so that they could pay for the literal ferry to the afterlife. Just as many people today believe that they should eat crackers and wine on a Sunday, or that God wants women to hide their bodies under black burqas. Every religion that has ever existed, and there are many, have all believed that they were right, that their rituals and rules and beliefs were 100% correct, and they all thought they nailed it. But where are they today? If they're not completely forgotten, they're on the silver screen, amusing us with their sword fights, animal sacrifices, and oracles. The religions of today are the entertainment of tomorrow. Everyone, I hope, is an atheist about Zeus and Apollo, Juno and Poseidon. I just added Jesus and Muhammad to that list.
Welcome back to Freethought Matters. We're talking with Alex Aronson with Court Accountability. So, Alex, let's talk about Russell Vought, co-author of Project 2025 and President-elect Donald Trump's pick for director of the Office of Management and Budget. 3 months ago, CNN reported on a hidden camera video of Vought explaining his policy plans, and they're frightening to say the least. Let's play some highlights from that report.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
You are looking at secretly recorded video of Russell Vought, a former cabinet member in the Trump administration. In this hotel suite, Vought thinks he's talking to family members of a wealthy donor. But one is a journalist, the other an actor, working undercover for the UK-based Center for Climate Reporting. The conversation covers a host of issues, like abortion and how his position differs from Trump.
He talks about rape, incest, and the life of the mother. I don't actually believe in those exceptions. I want to get to abolition.
His view of who should be an American.
So I want to make sure that we can say we're a Christian nation, and my viewpoint is mostly that I would probably be Christian nationism. That's pretty close to Christian nationalism. If we're going to have legal immigration, can we get people that actually believe in Christianity? Is that something, or do we have to have, are we not allowed to ask questions about Sharia law? We are trying to create a shadow Office of Management and Budget, a shadow National Security Council, and a shadow Office of Legal Counsel. Yeah. These are the main organs in government that you need outside to create the battle plan.
And you're not going to publish those?
No.
They go straight to...
Yeah, they're very, very close hold.
So, your reaction, Alex?
Very, very close hold. Well, of course, Donald Trump throughout the campaign, as Project 2025 became more well-known, more unpopular because of the really radical nature of the policy prescriptions that it lays out, he distanced himself as far as he could from this toxic agenda. He said, I have no idea who these people are, no idea what they're doing. This is not my agenda. Of course, that is belied not only by extensive evidence that came out during the campaign about, for example, Donald Trump's relationship going back years with Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, which is the organization that sits at the center of this 100-plus organization Project 2025 coalition. But of course, by the actions and the nominations that President-elect Donald Trump has started to roll out in the aftermath of the election. And that, of course, includes Russell Vought, but not just Russell Vought. Many other of the Project 2025 architects and authors appear to be heading into Trump's cabinet unless we can mount enough of an opposition to stop their nominations. And I do believe that Russell Vaught's nomination to run OMB, which is a relatively unknown organization within the executive branch, part of the White House, the Office of Management and Budget, as Vought said there in that video, it is one of the critical organs for the implementation of this agenda. Vought ran Trump's Office of Management and Budget in the first Trump administration, along with Project 2025 and Supreme Court allies like Mark Paoletta, who was a colleague of Vaught's at the Center for Renewing America, which was a Christian nationalist dark money organization that drove much of the Project 2025 development. And so, now that the American people have been hoodwinked by this lie that Trump had nothing to do with Project 2025, they are going to soon learn what it means to have a Project 2025 America as these extremists now rise to power. And Vought is going to be at the center of this effort.
So you had an article, co-wrote an article that appeared in December linking the Roberts Court and Trump's election. Can you talk more about that?
We've been really focused not just on Project 2025 and the court, but on their connections. We talked a little bit before the break about the Federalist Society, which of course has been effectively run by Leonard Leo, who is a co-chair of its board and formerly was its executive vice president. Leo is more than that, a impresario of dark money fundraising. He famously raised $1.6 billion in one dark money transaction, which is what we believe is the largest dark money transaction in American history. That sits in a trust, right? And he sends that money out, often through donor-advised funds. His favorite one is Charles Schwab, the big bank, which he routes this money through. And it funds the groups that bring cases to the court, that help support the justices when they come under attack, and has deep influence in the U.S. judiciary, but also are architecting Project 2025. Approximately 2/3 of the groups in that Project 2025 coalition have ties to Leonard Leo's funding, according to reporting that came out in 2024. And so it's essential that people understand these as twin and interconnected entities and agendas. And the Trump presidency, I think, must be understood, and this is what we get into in this piece, as not just the product of a disaffected and depleted American electorate that fell into the thrall of a fascistic strongman, but the product of a court majority that for decades has been undermining the levers of democracy. And you take your pick in terms of where you want to start. I think one very critically important case is the 2010 Citizens United case, which said that independent expenditures could not be regulated because they are free speech, that corporations should be able to freely spend, and that government couldn't regulate that. The line you can draw from that decision to Elon Musk's investment of over $200 million into Donald Trump's election is straight. Likewise, cases like Shelby County and Rucho, these are voting rights and gerrymandering cases that first gutted the Voting Rights Act to unleash a tidal wave of voter suppression laws in states that were formerly under the pre-clearance requirements of the Voting Rights Act. And Rucho, which basically greenlit partisan gerrymandering. Mike Johnson's House majority, his very narrow 3-seat House majority, owes directly to that decision. The North Carolina state legislature gerrymandered its seats, created 3 seats, and that's the majority right there. It's one of the closest House elections in U.S. history, if not the closest. I think overall the House majority was decided by about 7,000 votes. And then, of course, this past year, the Trump cases that were before the court, every one of them was a gift to Donald Trump's reelection. So from its decision to overturn the Colorado Supreme Court's application of the 14th Amendment's insurrection clause, which would have disqualified Trump from the ballot, to its sweeping decision granting President Trump immunity from criminal prosecution in Trump versus the United States. What's striking about these decisions is that, in contrast to literally every other set of judges and juries that reviewed Trump's criminal cases, the Trump judges and the U.S. Supreme Court were the only ones that ruled for Trump. And so, both structurally in terms of the erosion of American democracy and immediately in terms of, the very fact that Donald Trump was not running for president wearing a prison jumpsuit from jail, the Roberts Court was part and parcel of Trump's reascendance to
And
power.
that's a great place. I'm sorry we have to leave it there, Alex Aronson, but thank you so much for joining us today and for your work.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alex Aronson is with Court Accountability. And thank you for watching Freethought Matters.
Because Freethought Matters.